They called me cruel after I refused to let my parents and sister take over my $470,000 lake house. But before I share my story, please take a minute of your precious time to support our channel. Your support and love keeps us going. Sunlight spilled through the tall bay windows of my parents' dining room, bouncing off glassware until it looked like small rainbows were dancing across the table. Tradition always seemed heavier in that room. I adjusted the dark green linen napkin across my lap, breathing in the comforting scent of my mother's slow-cooked short ribs. At the head of the glossy oak table, my father, Earl Whitfield, carved into the meat with his usual precision, sliding thick slices onto the porcelain plates reserved only for Sundays. "Just a little for me," I said quietly. He didn't bother looking up. "You're too skinny, Corinne. Always have been." He laid a generous cut onto my plate anyway. At 40, I knew better than to argue, but the protest almost left my lips when the front door burst open. The atmosphere shattered. My younger sister Patrice breezed in, trailed by her husband Darius and their 3 children. Backpacks hit the floor, kids scrambled for seats, and Darius's heavy boots thudded across the wood. "Sorry we're late," Patrice announced with a grin that carried not an ounce of regret. Traffic by the strip mall was awful. "You went shopping before dinner?" I asked, but my voice drowned beneath my mother's delighted squeals as she embraced her grandchildren. I caught the briefest glance between my father and Patrice, a silent exchange I had known since childhood. That look always meant something had already been decided without me. "Well, we're all here now," Mama said, smoothing her apron. "Earl, finish serving before it goes cold." We slipped into the familiar rhythm of small talk. Mama asked about my most recent building designs. Dad grilled Darius about the markets. The children sulked about vegetables on their plates. Then Patrice's voice sliced through the chatter. "We're moving into your river house next week. Our foundation's cracking, and the repairs are supposed to take months." My fork froze in midair. "What?" "It's just sitting there anyway," Dad said, his tone calm, but his eyes sharp. Patrice's oldest boy grinned. "I'm taking the upstairs room with the balcony." His sister shot back. "No way. Grandma said I could have it." Their squabble became noise in the background. My chest tightened as I realized they'd already chosen bedrooms. This wasn't an idea Patrice came up with at the table. It had been planned, probably for weeks, with everyone but me involved. "Your house has more than enough room," Mama added, as if that settled everything. "And they won't be there forever." Forever. I nearly laughed. I'd spent 7 years pouring myself into that riverside home. Paid $360,000 just to buy it, then another $110,000 to bring it back from near ruin. 3 years ago, when floodwaters nearly destroyed it, I stayed there alone for weeks, pulling up rotted floors, hauling out moldy walls, while my family was off on a cruise. That house was my sanctuary, the one place I rebuilt myself after my marriage collapsed. Patrice's voice dripped with rehearsed self-righteousness. "Family helps family, Corinne. You know we'd do the same for you." Dad chimed in. "It'll just be for 8 months until the repairs are done." Darius stayed quiet, staring at his plate, his silence louder than words. I placed my napkin carefully beside my plate. A shift rose inside me, sharp and overdue. "Corinne, don't be difficult," Mama said, brushing away my silence with her hand. "This is what families do," Dad added, his tone slipping into that patronizing register he always used when he thought I was being selfish. Patrice leaned back, smug smile widening. She had always taken. I had always given. And our parents had always let it happen. Not this time. I reached into my purse and laid a thick manila folder on the table. "The contractors start Monday." Confusion flickered across their faces as I spread the paperwork out. Signed city permits, contractor agreements, renovation schedules, all dated months earlier. 9 months of work, I said evenly. Everything down to the studs. The dining room went silent. Dad's knife hovered above the roast. Mama's glass hung in midair. Patrice's smile collapsed. I lifted my water glass, the crystal catching the sunlight and scattering sharp prisms across the table. For once, I had the upper hand and everyone knew it. "You can't be serious," Patrice finally managed, voice climbing high. We already gave notice at our place. Where are we supposed to go? I took another sip of water and let every old memory line up in my mind like exhibits. Patrice borrowing my car for a weekend that lasted 2 months. The windshield crack that was already there. The short-term loan of $3,000 that somehow became $15 and then evaporated. The spare key sheet had cut without asking. The afternoon I walked in and found her taking a shower, like she owned my life. You'll have to find somewhere else, I said, steady as bedrock. Work begins Monday. Dad set his carving knife down, the performance of dinner officially over. His corporate negotiator voice slid into place. Corinne, be reasonable. Your sister has 3 children. And a cracked foundation, Mama added, nodding hard. You can't expect them to live in danger. I don't, I answered. I expect them to make a plan that doesn't depend on stripping mine. Patrice and Dad traded that quiet look again, the same one I'd seen when I was 16 and learned my college fund had mysteriously migrated to pay for Patrice's first wedding. I knew the script by heart. Demand, dramatics, and then the moral lecture. We've already started packing, Patrice said, shifting into her breathy plea. The moving truck is booked for Monday morning. This will break your father's heart, Mama whispered, reaching for Dad's hand like a stage cue. My phone buzzed against my lap. A text from Jamal Pierce, my general contractor. Materials delivered. Crew locked for Monday, 6:45 a.m. A second notification followed from Nova Shield Security. Smart lock system online. Warm certainty moved through me. Not fury, not panic. Readiness. What about storage? Darius asked, finally looking up from his plate. Could we at least use your garage until we sort things out? The garage is being converted to a studio, I said. Everything's going to the studs. Patrice's eyes glossed with tears she could switch on and off like a faucet. You'll regret choosing drywall over blood. Dad leaned forward, voice low and significant. Corinne, this could affect certain decisions about the future. The inheritance threat. Right on schedule. Think of the children, Mama added, raising the volume to that high, trembling pitch that used to unravel me. I folded my napkin with neat precision. The weight of all their expectations pressed against my shoulders and finally slid off. Poor planning on your part, I said, meeting Dad's gaze, doesn't create an emergency on mine. Recognition flashed across his face. I had used his own favorite line. I rose, sliding the folder back into my bag. I've kept every commitment attached to my property. I expect the same respect for my boundaries. Sit down, Dad snapped. We're not finished. I am. Patrice's oldest stared at me, confused. But I told my friends about my balcony room. It isn't your room, I said gently. And it isn't your house. I walked to the foyer without looking back. Their voices tangled behind me, protests, accusations, recycled guilt. The front door closed with a soft click that felt more final than any slam. Outside, the autumn air tasted like new starts. I made it to my car before Dad's name lit my phone. I let it ring. By the time I reached the highway, there were 14 missed calls stacked like a to-do list I would never open. Only then did the adrenaline tremble into my hands, that aftershock shake I knew would pass. I pulled into a rest stop and dialed Jamal. He answered on the first ring. Make sure the security system is fully armed by morning, I said, and roll the dumpsters tight across the garage entry. I don't want any surprise visitors. Already planned it, he said, amusement in his voice. After the flood repairs and how you handled those alone, I figured your folks might try a Hail Mary. He remembered. Someone remembered. The locks are changed, he added. Cameras at every entry point. Nova Shield confirmed integration. The shaking in my hand slowed. Thanks, Jamal. See you Monday at 6:45. I hung up. A message from Patrice popped onto the screen. Dad is furious. Fix this now. I set the phone to silent and eased back onto the road. The sky deepened to indigo, a strip of city, lights glimmering far ahead. I headed home. Not to the river house, which was about to become something bigger than a building, but to my apartment, where I had learned to sleep without checking the locks 3 times. Tomorrow I knew they'd escalate. For the first time in our history, I was ready. Monday came with the rumble of an engine that didn't belong. Coffee paused halfway to my lips. I watched from my kitchen window as a burgundy moving truck crept up the narrow gravel road toward my river house. My phone buzzed, another early call from Dad. I let it fade and picked up the folder of stamped permits. Paper, but it felt like armor. By the time I pulled in, orange safety cones marked the perimeter and sawhorses blocked the drive. Jamal's crew moved with clean, confident rhythm, clipboards, hard hats, and bright vests against sharp morning light. Ms. Whitfield. Jamal nodded, meeting me at the gate. Permits posted. Demo on interior starts in 30. Perfect, I said, scanning the property. I see we have visitors. They rolled up 10 minutes ago, he replied. Said they had your permission to move in. The truck door clanged open. Patrice climbed down, sunglasses shoved into her hair, anger already blooming on her cheeks. What is this? She demanded, pointing at the equipment. Your people won't let our movers through. I met her halfway across the gravel, keeping a polite distance. A Nova Shield guard I'd hired for the week stood near Jamal, calm and observant. As I said last Sunday, I replied, lifting the folder so the permits caught the light. Renovation begins today. The property isn't habitable. You can't be serious. Patrice's voice climbed, drawing the crew's attention. We gave notice. Where are we supposed to go? I pulled an envelope from my bag. This is a 6-month storage unit contract, already paid. She stared but didn't take it. Storage? We need to live somewhere, Corinne. Your housing is your responsibility. I said, the words smooth now. The foundation didn't crumble overnight. Patrice pivoted toward the porch. I still have a key. We'll work around your little project. She jammed the key into the lock. Nothing. She twisted harder. A calm synthetic voice spoke from the doorframe speaker. Welcome to Nova Shield. Unauthorized entry detected. Property owner and security have been alerted. My phone chimed. Patrice turned, stunned. You changed the locks? Last week. I nodded toward the tiny black cameras tucked neat under the eaves. The system automatically pings the police on attempted trespass. Something gave way in her expression, the polish cracking, entitlement showing through like rust. You can't do this to us. We're family. Family that respects boundaries is welcome, I said. My phone rang again, Nova Shield confirming the alert. I answered, verified, and ended the call. Patrice retreated to the truck, gesturing wildly at Darius. Jamal walked up, hard hat tucked under his arm. We're cued to start, Ms. Whitfield. Master Suite demo by Thursday, if we keep pace. Let's proceed, I said, signing his clipboard. He hesitated. Expect interference? He asked. The moving truck roared as if in answer. Instead of turning around, the driver nudged past the sawhorses onto the lawn, tires chewing through the ornamental grasses I planted in spring. The ramp thumped down. 2 movers hustled a massive mahogany dresser, my grandmother's old piece Patrice always claimed, onto the grass. Since you won't be reasonable, Patrice called, triumphant again. We'll store things here until you come to your senses. I didn't step forward. I pulled out my phone and tapped a number I'd saved yesterday. Riverbend Auction and Estate. A voice answered. This is Corinne Whitfield. Proceed with pickup as discussed today. Please direct the proceeds to the Bridge and Bloom Mentorship Fund. I held Patrice's stare while I spoke. Her triumph flickered. They'll arrive within the hour, I said, ending the call. Everything left outside the sheds is being removed today. Jamal glanced toward the growing hill of furniture. Want my crew to work around the pile? No need, I said, handing him the final authorization. We stick to plan. Work began. Sledgehammers sounded from inside, a steady percussion under the crisp air. On the lawn, the furniture mound grew. Patrice rotated between threats and tears. Darius shadowed the movers, apologetic but compliant. By early afternoon, the auction truck rolled in, crew tagging each piece, documenting placement. Patrice stared at me, shock turning into a tremor. That's heirloom furniture. Then it shouldn't have been abandoned on property you don't own, I said, and signed the release. 2 days later, my phone buzzed just as I stood in the bare frame of what used to be the master bedroom. Workers hammered and pried around me, peeling drywall until only skeletal beams remained. I stepped into the hall to hear better. "You heartless witch." Patrice's voice cracked through the line. The auction truck came and took everything. Grandma's dresser, the dining set gone. Those were heirlooms. I leaned against the stripped wooden frame, steady. Heirlooms shouldn't be dumped on land that isn't yours, Patrice. Documentation says otherwise. Her scream echoed, but something had changed in me. The calm wasn't forced anymore. It was natural, settled, like brickwork finally set in mortar. "I have photographs of everything abandoned on site," I continued evenly. "Security footage of your attempted entry. A police file noting trespass warnings. All logged, all airtight." The line went silent. I also informed the property managers, I said, watching a worker swing a sledgehammer through the last stretch of wall. Sunlight burst through the raw frame. "Any visits here scheduled, with notice. Nothing else." "They're coming to talk sense into you," she hissed finally. "Mom and Dad, this isn't over." Perfect, I thought. Let them see it stripped, rebuilt, reclaimed. By the time the familiar sedan rolled up the gravel, the crew had already finished gutting the master suite. I met my parents at the porch, sunlight pouring through the exposed skeleton behind me. "What have you done?" Dad barked, voice barely audible over the electric saws. "Exactly what I told you," I answered, adjusting my hard hat. 9-month rebuild. Every nail replaced. They followed me into the gutted shell of the living room. Beams crossed like ribs, plaster dust floating through shafts of light. The polished hardwood floors my mother once loved were bare subfloor now. "This is madness," Mama whispered. "You've destroyed everything." "Destroyed?" I shook my head. "No. Rebuilding." Dad's jaw clenched, businessman instincts twitching. "Corinne, this is excessive. Stop the work and maybe, we can still make arrangements for Patrice's family." I laughed, the sound bouncing oddly in the hollowed space. "Not a chance." He stepped closer, eyes flashing. "You've never understood duty to family. I can cut you out of the will altogether." Months ago, I would have flinched. Now I met his gaze. "You already did. When I refused to co-sign Darius's bad real estate gamble last year." Mama gasped, color draining from her face. Dad froze. They hadn't expected me to know. "Patrice told me," I said simply, lifting the blueprints off a makeshift work table. "Said you rewrote it to protect the assets." Her words. Mama's eyes welled with the same staged tears she'd always wielded as leverage. "Corinne, please. Think of the children." I turned toward Jamal. "How's the reading nook for the mentorship program?" "Framing's nearly done," he called back. "We'll match your designs exactly." Confusion crossed Mama's face. "Mentorship program?" "For foster youth," I said, my voice even. The auction proceeds already funded it. $12,000 worth of furniture made sure those kids finally have a matching set. Dad's eyes narrowed. "You sold family heirlooms." "Abandoned furniture. Documented by the auction house. It's public record." Mama clutched his arm, her voice trembling. "Earl, she's making us look shameful. People are talking." I slid my phone from my pocket and pulled up the local news article, my donation highlighted, comments flooding with community praise. "Public shaming doesn't stick when the truth is transparent," I said, tucking it away again. Dad's shoulders shifted, his tone softening for the first time. "Let's talk options. Perhaps a compromise." "Progress," I said, noting a change from threats to negotiation. "The renovation continues as planned, but I'll help Patrice find a rental within her budget." Mama's eyes flickered, cautious. "That would be appreciated." Notifications buzzed on my phone, security confirming no attempted entries since the lockout, the auction house sending receipts, Jamal's crew posting progress photos of the new deck. Dad's eyes roamed the blueprints, reluctant admiration creeping into his face. This is efficient work, he muttered. Sometimes you strip it all back to build true, I replied. Before they could answer, my phone lit up with Darius's name. I excused myself. Corinne. His voice was low, defeated. I want to apologize. I should have spoken up sooner. She pushed and I didn't stop it. I looked through the gutted frame toward the water glinting beyond. Sometimes the hardest foundation you'll ever pour is the one under your own boundaries, I said quietly. But it's the one that holds. Behind me, the crew pressed on, hammers, nails, beams, transforming not just a house, but the ground I stood on. 3 months later, the familiar glow of the dining room felt almost surreal. The burgundy napkins, the crystal glasses catching prisms of light, it all looked the same, but the air was charged differently, heavy with anticipation. I had accepted the invitation, knowing full well a new intervention awaited me. Your mother made her roast, Dad said, carving meat with the precision of a surgeon. His voice carried the stiff politeness of a man preparing for a business negotiation. It smells delicious, I replied, smoothing my napkin. My eyes slid toward the extra place settings. Are we expecting more guests? Mom and Dad exchanged a glance I knew too well. That look had preceded every disappointment of my childhood. We thought it'd be nice to have the family together, Mom said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The doorbell chimed, and Dad's shoulders relaxed. Mom disappeared to the foyer. Moments later, she returned with Reverend Coleman, our longtime pastor and a man I deeply respected. Of course, a neutral mediator, though never truly neutral when invited by them. Corinne, he said warmly, taking the chair beside me. Your mother tells me you've been busy with quite a project. Transformative, I answered, recognizing the setup. My parents had always preferred stacking the jury. Mom quickly filled his plate, then Saturday, we were just talking about family harmony, she said, her voice carefully pitched, and how sometimes it's worth adjusting plans for the greater good. The kids miss their aunt, she added, her tone soft but pointed. Families should stay close, especially when times are hard. I felt my grip tighten on the fork. The pattern unfolded predictably. Moral suggestion, emotional leverage, implied fault. Dad followed suit. The Thompsons let their daughter's families stay nearly a year during renovations. Barbara says it brought them all closer. Every word layered pressure. Every example a reminder of what good families do. I placed my fork down gently. Reverend, let me show you something, I said, pulling my tablet from my bag. With a swipe, the first photo appeared, my riverside house stripped to its studs, scaffolding wrapped tight around it. This was day 1, I explained, flipping through progress shots. Workers in hard hats. Exposed beams. Sawdust floating like pollen. Reverend Coleman leaned closer. My word, what a transformation. The most recent images glowed, wide windows framing the water, vaulted ceilings supported by reclaimed beams, oak floors gleaming under the sunlight. That's the master suite, I said. The balcony nearly doubled the budget, but the sunrise is worth every dollar. Mom's fork paused midair. It's completely different. That was the point, I answered smoothly, sliding to another file. The renovation timeline and valuation. Started 5 months ago. Projected value increase? Over 40% from its last appraisal. Dad's expression shifted despite himself. The businessman inside him couldn't ignore numbers. This was never about denying Patrice a roof, I said. It was about executing the plans I laid out long before her housing crisis. Then I flipped again, this time to older photos. Storm damage, water waist high inside, mold creeping across walls. Receipts of $30,000 in emergency repairs. Text threads from that week where I asked for help and was told everyone was too busy. The silence was sharp. Respecting boundaries isn't cruelty, I said softly. It's adulthood. Dad's shoulders sagged, his sharp edges dulling for once. Mom's lips parted, then closed. Finally, she whispered, I should have helped you. Back then. A genuine apology. The first in years. The front door burst open. Patrice swept in, cheeks flushed, ready for war. only to falter when she saw the scene. Our parents subdued, the Reverend reflective, my tablet on the table with evidence glowing. "What's going on?" she demanded, scanning the room. "I thought this was about the house." "It was," I replied, standing calmly. "I've shared the progress. When it's finished in 6 months, you'll all receive an invitation as guests. Advance notice required." From my purse, I withdrew elegant invitation cards. "Housewarming, March 18th. Consider yourselves invited." I slid one toward her. The shock in her eyes was almost enough to make me smile. I gathered my things, the roast untouched, and walked to the door. The question hung in the room as I left. Who would actually come, and on whose terms? Driving away, I felt none of the old guilt, none of the suffocating obligation. Only a calm certainty. Peace doesn't demand surrender. Sometimes it demands a line drawn deep. Morning light danced across the river, scattering diamonds across my bedroom ceiling. 6 months had passed since that ambush dinner, and the transformation was finally complete. I cradled a mug of coffee on the balcony, savoring the quiet. No voices demanding, no guilt weighing. Only birdsong from the tall oak I refused to cut down, and the steady rhythm of water against the dock. Below me, the kitchen gleamed, copper fixtures, reclaimed counters, light spilling across wide plank oak floors. Last weekend, I'd hosted friends for the first time. Wine poured into glasses I chose, laughter echoing in rooms once earmarked for Patrice's kids. The new exercise suite filled the space she had claimed as her master bedroom. A daily reminder that self-care is not selfish. My phone buzzed. A text from Jamal. "Can't believe we pulled this off. Best project of my career." I smiled, remembering his skeptical look when I first laid out the vision. "You want to gut a perfectly good house?" he'd said. Now he brought potential clients here, always asking permission first. The doorbell chimed. I checked the security feed. My parents on the porch. Dad shifting uncomfortably, Mom clutching a plant, their first visit since the renovation ended. I unlocked the door remotely. "Come in," I said through the intercom. They stepped in cautiously. Dad's eyes lifted to the vaulted ceilings. Mom lingered at the dining table, positioned where she once argued it should hold children's homework. "Corinne," Dad said slowly, "this island," his words trailed, rare awe softening his tone. "Remarkable," Mom finished for him, setting the jade plant on the console table. I poured coffee into handmade mugs while they wandered. Mom lingered at the photo wall, pictures of my hikes, my work, my travels. No family portraits. "This is who I am now," I said gently. She didn't ask, but I answered anyway. Dad nodded, his eyes tracing the craftsmanship. "You've built something extraordinary here." That evening, I opened my doors again. Jamal stopped by with champagne. The security company sent a basket with a card for our most steadfast client. Even the auction house owner came, proudly showing photos of the community center now furnished with Patrice's abandoned heirlooms. The director cried, he said. First time the kids had matching furniture in their space. Later, my phone buzzed. A message from Patrice. "I'm sorry about the furniture. Can we talk?" I thought for a moment before replying, "Dinner next month. Bring dessert." Boundaries intact, door cracked open just enough. As guests left and quiet returned, Dad paused at the threshold. Respecting boundaries isn't cruelty. It's adulthood. He echoed my words back, finally understanding. Alone again, I walked down to the dock. The sunset spilled gold, then violet, across the river's surface. My reflection shimmered strong and unbroken. Peace, I realized, doesn't come from giving in. It comes from honoring the lines you draw and standing firm when they're tested. In this sanctuary, rebuilt by my own hands and vision, I had found both peace and power. In the end, Corinne didn't just protect her house, she reclaimed her life. Every boundary she built became a brick in her freedom. Every no laid the foundation for peace. Because sometimes the most powerful renovation isn't in wood or stone, it's in the courage to rebuild yourself. If this story resonated with you, tap follow for more powerful tales of resilience and justice. Comment below where you're watching from. like, and share to remind someone they have the right to stand their ground. Stay tuned. More stories of strength are on the way.